Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Thursday. That means it's time for a gear talk. We do this every other Thursday at 5 p.m. We do it like clockwork. If you ain't here, I don't know what you're doing, because we've had this set schedule for quite a bit now. But I forgive you, because today we're going to talk about a topic that kind of gets brushed over a lot, and I'm very surprised about that because it's something that was such a big problem in the original Gears of War game. Today we're going to be talking about a character that kind of opens up a can of worms that we're introduced to during Zeta's adventures through Alima, and that would be the unidentified Theron Elite. That's what it says, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just going to call him the Theron Elite, because along with him and the other Theron Elites, there's a lot of stuff that we have to talk about involving them and Kryll. The Theron Elite that we meet in Alima is actually a very special Theron Elite. He was actually the person that followed RAAM and went with RAAM throughout the entire mission throughout Alima that they were going through to pretty much have the Kryll storm come. And as we go through and play as him, we think it's just a normal Theron Elite. Like, oh, we get to play as the Elite, we get a nice skin later on for multiplayer, all of that. It's not until later on in the game, when we're playing as Zeta, we come across this Elite and we have to go against him, mono E4 basically. We realize he can use the Kryll, like RAAM, on a more minor scale as we can see, but he's able to do it. The question I always thought that really doesn't get a big answer anywhere is, pardon, how is that a thing? How is that possible? How does that work? Yeah, that's basically all we get is just he can use the Kryll. Oh, also, RAAM has a Reaver that's able to take care of using the Kryll too. And RAAM can use it, obviously, but we never get anything else. So, I just want to talk about, like, just basically nonsense involving the Kryll. I have a planned video for talking about Kryll in general coming later on, but I want to talk about the ability to control Kryll, because RAAM can do it, but RAAM was never born with that ability. We see throughout the Rise of RAAM comics that he never used it, never addressed it, never had anything coinciding with that ability. It just never happened. It was just RAAM before he became General RAAM. And even when he became General RAAM, when he went to the surface, now it was the middle of the day, granted, but there's no hint or anything of using Kryll. It's just never said. I had to think about it. Like Srock, it was never brought up that he could use Kryll, or it was in his repertoire, or he ever utilized anything. It's never brought up in the comics about Kryll, about utilizing and controlling. Now, we get RAAM in the main game, the first Gears of War, where he's just chalking it around left and right at the end of the game. We have Rise of RAAM. He uses it as a main form of a weapon for Shadow of RAAM, not Rise of RAAM, Shadow. He's using that as his weapon. That's one of his main fights. He doesn't go in with a gun. He goes in with his knife and his Kryll. That's how he fights. Then we have the Reaver, which he's basically riding around that's safe from the Kryll. And then we have the Theron Elite that can also use it. And my idea is, my hypothesis, my theories are kind of just churning out at this point. What if it involves Mira? Or something involving Mira, because we know that Mira can talk to any, basically, Locust, in general she wants, telepathically, like a one-way communication. She's able to talk to RAAM through his mind when he is in Alima. Here's what we gotta do, here's what you're gonna do, kill those humans, woo. We know that she can do that. So that's a thing we already know about. Later on when we get the Swarm, we know that it's basically a two-way communication, it's a hive mind at that point, but at this point, one-way comms. My thought is, now, what if she can bestow the ability to control Kryll to a Locust? What if it's something like that? Now, we know RAAM is very special. It's a 1 in a million birth that he was brought into this world. It was stated, like, it's conceivable how he came to be. Like, he is a freak of nature among drones, because he is a drone. Drones cannot control Kryll. So maybe another theory is, like, maybe he was, like, born into it, but he didn't awaken it or something. I don't know. Maybe the Cantus had something to do with it. But I'm thinking, honestly, for my opinion of things, it falls onto Mira. I think Mira is able to, like, bestow, like, you are now able to use the Kryll. The Kryll are under your control or something like that. Like, she unlocks, like, a genetic trait inside a very select few. And then you have RAAM, who started building up his own Theron Elite squadron that was his personal Therons. And maybe it was like, I'm going to train them, they're going to be under me, these are my Therons, I am going to bestow them the ability to use the Kryll. Now, we never see any other Theron Elite ever use the Kryll, aside from the unidentified Theron Elite from Alima. Though we do know there are other Theron Elites. RAAM had his own Therons and all of that. He had a good amount of them by the time 14AE came around. In Operation Midnight, great comic, go and read it. Jace is the main character. Jace comes in contact with RAAM again, and RAAM has his Therons with him, and they're all Theron elites, and they look identical to the Theron elite we have in Alima, but these guys are coming in, and they're fighting torque bows and everything. They are also not using Kryll, and this mission is in the middle of the night. My question is what was going on? Like, why was it one, or were another hypothesis all of them could do it, but why weren't they utilized? Another theory I have, there's going to be a lot of them in this, but this is just talking about Kryll control, basically. Okay, what if the Theron elites are also able to do it? Maybe they're like bestowed or something, they're able to do a trait or anything, but there already has to be a large presence of Kryll in the area for them to do it. For instance, with the Theron elite in Alima, there was an entire sky, an entire dome of Kryll covering an entire city. Maybe because there was so much, they could be like, I'm controlling these because I'm able to, because there's just a lot in place. Maybe it's something like that. It's a thought process of like, they have the capabilities, but why don't they use it? Or they can't use it unless there's a special circumstance, or RAAM bestows it. So RAAM, we know, can just use it, no problem. He can just do it. But we don't see him use it in Operation Midnight either. My best guess for that is maybe because it was a covert operation. They were going in quiet so they couldn't be seen when they were attacking a Midnight Squad. That's my best guess. My best guess is when they went after Midnight, they were trying to be covert and just take them out, not using Kryll or anything to give them away, something like that. Because even though it's night now and then, it doesn't mean the Kryll are everywhere on the surface. When night comes, if there's a heavy population of Kryll in the area, then they're a problem. But if it's like the open countryside and there's none, you're basically okay if you're outside. So maybe that's something too. Maybe RAAM was like, there's no Kryll here, we don't need them, it's going to be my personal Therons. Maybe it's something like that. That's kind of what I'm banking on right now. Maybe it was the idea of, okay, if there's a lot of Kryll around, the Theron elites, they're able to use the Kryll, but not as well as RAAM can. RAAM can kind of just use them as he pleases whenever he wants. He used it on a moving train at one point. I'm sure there were not a lot of Kryll in that area, but he had them with him. So I want to say that's how it works for at least control itself, but we don't know still how it's bestowed or given or the ability, because Locust in general cannot do it. We have had a lot of games to go through this, they can't. Now, they do have the ability to use, like, Kryll grenades and everything, or smoke grenades and stuff like that. That makes sense. That's an outside force using it where they can bring the Kryll into play. That is something I understand. Like, okay, I'm going to throw this grenade that basically lets off, like, a clouded area the Kryll can come into. That makes sense. You're not using the Kryll. You're using something that can basically not maneuver, but basically manipulate the Kryll. That makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a good amount of sense. We have a lot of games that do it. The Diggers, for instance, in 3, that uses the same thing. That's a living being that they shoot off. My thought process is, again, that someone had to bestow it to RAAM, and then from there, RAAM has the ability to kind of like say, you're able to use this, or you're using a fraction of my power. Maybe that was it. Since RAAM's able to use it, he's giving... I don't think the Kryll work like this, but he sees them as pets, and he's like, okay, I'm going to give this Theron elite temporary usage of my Kryll. Maybe it's something like that even, because we have to think, in the comics, okay, you can say what you want about Operation Midnight, that came out before you had the events of Shadow of RAAM. So, that one can kind of be explained, or like, okay, timeline-wise, it might make sense, but also at the same time, distribution, release, it makes sense why they're not there. But when it comes down to the Rise of RAAM comic, you have RAAM in his own comic series that takes place before the entire events of him becoming a general, and release-wise came out before or during Gears of War 4. That's a long stretch from when we last dealt with RAAM in general. There's a lot of things that could have been explained, but we got nothing at all. So it has to be something involving, like, an ability that was gifted. Like, I keep going over that, but it's the only thing that makes sense, because biologically it doesn't make sense. There's no item or tool he has that can manipulate them by what we've seen. He's been damaged and hurt many times. It's not like he couldn't use them after. After Zeta took him down, and he was close. Let's all admit, like RAAM was close to death at that point. Like, one good shot, he was pinned down, he could have died. Like, all of his cards for getting out of a jam were kind of used up. Like, he wasn't like I'm about to bleed out. But he was like, I'm okay. All bets are off. I can die here now. I would imagine with all that damage he took, maybe there would have been some damage where he can't control the Kryll. But we see he can shoot out a Kryll blast towards Kim, basically just out of a whim for doing it. I mean, even when you have the Killer Instinct, the newest one that came out with him as a DLC character, the Kryll, he comes out covered in the Kryll when he's introduced. The Kryll still play a role even outside the canon of Gears of War. So you have to think, with the Kryll being such a force that RAAM is able to use, why is it not explained how he can use the Kryll? I can live with the fact of us not knowing the in-depth, dirty detail of how he, like, controls, like, with his mind or anything. I'm okay with that. Just how can he do it in general? Because the Rise of RAAM tells me he did not have that ability. We get over to the main Gears game, he can use it. In between that is the Shadow of RAAM, he can use it, and others can also do it. Why do we get nothing else, okay? Operation Midnight, I literally have it pulled up here. Operation Midnight, following Midnight Squad, takes place the Storm of 14 AE. Guess what? Evacuation of Alima happened years and years before that. He's not using Kryll here. His Theron elites are not using Kryll here. So what's the dealio here? And all of them die too. All of his Theron elites here die. And it's not like that's the end of them all. That wasn't all of them that he had, but okay. RAAM escapes. That's fine. We have to get him to Gears of War 1 somehow. But why were the Kryll never an option? You know, like, maybe an open field, like I said, but we don't get it. We don't know why. And that's the part that bugs me, like, how did you get this ability, and how can others get the ability? Why did the Locust not utilize this more? Because it seems to me, the Locusts, if they just came out at night and the Kryll was on their side, kind of takes care of the problem. Because when RAAM first appeared and he's using the Kryll, it is still light showing in. There is still daylight out. He's using them in the day. So it's not like, oh no, the Kryll can't be used during the day, because you can do it. Yeah, there was a bit of the sky that was blackened out, but he could still do it. He could still tell them what to do. What gives RAAM and these Theron elites the ability that no other Locust can? Because you'd think that Cantus would have some way of doing it, especially Scourge with how deep he is into, like, the fumes of the emulsion. And basically, I don't want to say there's a mythical, magical sense or anything, but he is communing with something. He's telepathically or somehow leading the worm. It could just be chance of luck. It could be like, hey, I'm food and I'm in front of you. But if you're able to do that, there has to be something involving the Kryll. In Alima, the Shadow of RAAM, it's brought up again, like this other character can use it. It is never touched upon after that ever again. We don't get it in books, comics, the continuation of the games, because at this point in the series, especially where we are now all the way into Gears 5, the Kryll are basically close to, or if not extinct. They don't exist anymore. Like, as far as I could tell from 1 to 2, they were damaged enough to the point where the massive hordes and the massive groupings of them that could, like, just cover the skies, that's basically gone. There are still Kryll here and there, but they're more like they're repopulating or close to extinction. Think of it like if all the bats in the world were in the upper hollow, not the lower, but the upper hollow, and then a light mass bomb hit it and took out like 95% of all the bats. I mean, okay, the bats aren't really going to be a problem, or if you see one, oh hey, it's a bat. You know, the Kryll aren't going to damage somebody. If night comes, one Kryll is not going to hurt someone that much. One person could take out a singular Kryll without a problem. It's when there's a lot that there's an issue. That's what I want to end it on. My theory, my idea of why the Kryll are able to be controlled by others aside from RAAM is just an idea of bestowment, or it could be a situation of just the RAAM giving someone permission. It could be something like that. So, just something to throw around in your thoughts for a moment, just an idea of what's going on. But yeah, that's going to do it. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible, and thank the patrons for making this possible. I want to thank everyone for watching. So, when this video, I was recording it and everything, I just got back the day after from my grandmother's funeral. It was a very nice service. Everything was very good and very nice. Basically, I'm playing a lot of catch-up, so this one was already on my list of videos I was going to do, the idea of, like, the theories and the idea of, like, how does this work, but it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, I need something quick and easy, like a theory video or something I can just shoot out, because it's not that I don't want to put my time into this, but I have a lot of other things I'm handling at the moment. A lot of family stuff here and there is still popping up we're dealing with. In fact, I have things here that I'm still dealing with too. I can't really show you yet, but when the time comes, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I have it right next to me. But it's a lot of stuff. You know, she was a big part of our lives, and I know I've brought it up a lot in the past weeks. I'm sorry if y'all don't want to hear me talk about my grandma anymore, but you know, she was a big part of all of our lives. It wasn't just like, you know, she was here and there. Like, she was there a lot, and we've been taking the time to really deal with someone who was close to all of us and really heavy into our lives, and kind of just sorting things out, because there was a lot to sort out, and we're still dealing with it. So I want to thank you all for watching, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. We're going to cover some characters. Don't worry, we'll get back onto a more formatted system, I swear. Catch you on the next one. Later.